Children's Church. I'm so glad to have you here with me. And all this month we've been talking about victories that are impossible without God. So of course we had to round out the month with everyone's favorite impossible victory, Joshua at the Battle of Jericho. We're going to grab our Bibles. We're going to Joshua chapter 6. This time I'm going to sing you a different song while we find ourselves. Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, and the walls came tumbling down. You heard about your men of Gideon, you talk about your men of Saul. Nothing compares to Joshua at the battle of Jericho. Woo! All right, we're in Joshua chapter 6. Now verse 1, I'm starting at the beginning. Now Jericho was strongly fortified because of the Israelites, no one leaving or entering. The Lord said to Joshua, "Look, I have handed Jericho, its king, and its fighting men over to you. March around the city with all the men of war circling the city one time. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry 7 ram horn trumpets in front of the Ark of the Covenant. But on the 7th day, march around the city 7 times while the priests blow the trumpets. When there is a prolonged blast of the horn and you hear its sound, have all the people give a mighty shout. Then the city wall will collapse, and the people will advance, each man straight ahead." So Joshua, son of Nun, summoned the priests and said to them, "Take up the Ark of the Covenant, and have 7 priests carry 7 trumpets in front of the Ark of the Lord." He said to the people, "Move forward, march around the city, and have armed troops go ahead of the Ark of the Lord." And after Joshua had spoken to the people, 7 priests carrying 7 trumpets before the Lord moved forward and blew the trumpets. The Ark of the Lord's covenant followed them. While the trumpets were blowing, the armed troops went in front of the priests and blew the trumpets, and the rear guard behind the Ark. But Joshua had commanded the people, "Do not shout or let your voice be heard. Not one word should come out of your mouth until I say shout!" Every time I do that, I lose my place. I've got to stop doing that. Then you are to shout. We're in verse 11 now. So the Ark of the Lord was carried around the city, circling it once. They returned to their camp and spent the night there. Joshua got up early the next morning. The priests took the Ark of the Lord, and 7 priests carrying 7 trumpets marched to the front of the Ark. While the trumpets were blowing, the armed troops went in front and the rear guard behind. On the 2nd day they did it again, and again, and again. The 7 priests with 7 trumpets, and the rear guard behind, and the mighty men in front. For 6 days, and not once did anyone else make a single sound, no words, as they marched around the entire city. Early on the 7th day, they started at dawn and marched around the city 7 times in the same way. That was the only day they marched around the city 7 times. After the 7th time, the priests blew the trumpets, and Joshua said to the people, "Shout, for the Lord has given you this city." But the city and everything in it are set apart to the Lord for destruction. Only Rahab and everyone in her house will live, because she hid the men we sent. But keep yourself from the things set apart, or you'll be set apart for destruction. If you take those things, you'll be set apart in the camp of Israel, for destruction will bring disaster with it. For all the silver and gold and articles of bronze are dedicated to the Lord and must go into the Lord's treasury. So the people shouted, and the trumpets sounded. When they heard the blast of the trumpet, the people gave a great shout, and the wall collapsed. The people advanced into the city, each man straight ahead, and they captured the city. Why is that such a popular kids' story? There are a few reasons, in my opinion. One is it has a very good folkloric structure. Everything happens in repetition. There are 7 priests with 7 trumpets. Everything that makes a story good to tell out loud. And it's an interesting story, an impossible battle, won in an impossible way. But I think there's a better reason that it's such a popular children's church story. God gave Joshua weird instructions. But unlike Gideon, Joshua didn't ask questions. Joshua had spent 40 years in the desert, following a cloud by day and fire by night. He had spent 40 years learning from Moses, spent 40 years following and listening to God without question. So when God gave him strange instructions, Joshua said, "Yes, Lord," And he followed them all down to the letter in God's manner, in God's timing. And I think that's why it's such a popular story for younger people. Because he listened. He listened first. Now, I think that's interesting, personally. But I think a big reason that Joshua is such an enduring figure isn't because of that one battle. Joshua won a lot of battles, but that's the famous one because that was God's victory. Joshua followed God's plan, and the victory came to them. And everything in Jericho, except for Rahab, who had hidden their spies, and everyone in her house, was destroyed. Now, interestingly, Rahab would go on to have a child, who would have a child, who would have a child, eventually all the way down to Jesus. That's someone he's related to. I think that's neat. Sometimes the things we're told to do don't make sense to us, but that's because we can't see the same things everyone else does. God's vision is infinite. He saw what needed to be done, and he handed the victory into Joshua's hands because Joshua listened and followed God's plan. That's what I want you guys to remember for this week. Also remember the song. It's very catchy. I'll be singing it all day now. Have a wonderful week, and we'll be back next month with a whole new topic, and I'll see you then.